What's up, Internet? We are here with a very big deal. We just passed 1,000 subscribers. Very excited for that. And, you know, it's important to celebrate stuff like this. So I've been racking my brain about, you know, what would be the best way to celebrate this and really celebrate the fact this channel has come so far. And the fact is, it wouldn't have come anywhere near this far, and it won't continue to grow without you. So I think we need to do something that sort of celebrates us and tries to make this channel a little bit more of an intimate experience. And, you know, how do I bring all of you people in to understand, you know, what I am and who I am and all this nonsense? And really the best way I could think to do that was to just show off my collection. This collection is the, well, without you, lifeblood of this series. It's the viewers, you know, the subscribers, the supporters, and, you know, the games that I cover, because without them I can't do this. So I want to show you my game collection. This is my collection. Well, not all of it. I haven't added the games from last year because I keep them separate for Game of the Year purposes, but it's a good enough visual representation. I don't have wall-to-wall games like a lot of people I've seen out there. I have one shelf. Big shelf, mind you, and it's filled to the brim, which is part of the reason why taking down my games to do this means that I can better organize it, but it's a good visual representation. I have a little bit of everything, and, you know, we're going to take a look at each of these games individually, but before we do that, I have 3 caveats to this. First, we're not doing this all in one sitting. This would take forever. I mean, I've got a plan for this. Doing this by system, it's still going to take forever. Second, I'm not doing digital games. The past generation for me has pretty much been almost entirely digital, so we'd be here forever to do that, and then I'd have to, like, sort out stuff that's like demos and stuff, because like the Xbox system and the PS4 system, not ideal. So just gonna get rid of that headache. And finally, pirate games, we're going to give them their own thing. So while we are going to do NES Famicom today, my pirate NES Famicom games, those will be done near the end, I'm sure. Anyway, let's get started by looking at my NES games. Now, I do these alphabetically because I'm insane like that, but don't have any A's, so we start with the B's with Back to the Future, the video game. Help Marty McFly fix the past to save the future, a Power Play series. I don't know if there are any more Power Play series games, but apparently this was one of them. It was also published by LJN. I know a lot of people like to think LJN made all those terrible games. Not true. They were publishers, not developers. They did make the terrible X-Men game and one other game that I think was exclusive to Europe, but that was it. Otherwise, they weren't responsible for how bad these games were. They were responsible for making them available, but, you know, they aren't responsible for how bad they are. But that said, I don't think this is quite as bad as people make it out to be. Not a great game, mind you, but not as bad as people make it out to be. It's got a few different gameplay styles. It's like a scrolling shmup, and then it's got some nice little arcadey bits. It's not well made, but it's not horrible. And another little known fact about this game, the theme song to this game is actually The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News. It's very distorted, but it's definitely that, which is, I think, pretty cool. I got this in a bundle, and most of my NES games I actually got in this one bundle, but this was not one I was looking for, but it's one I added to my collection, and it's not as bad as people make it out to be. Still not great, but not that bad. Moving on to number 2, we got another game from that bundle. We have Batman the Video Game. Brought to you by Sunsoft, back when they were worth something. Because, you know, they were making Gimmick and Euphoria and tons of awesome stuff on the NES. Once they got into the SNES, not so much. They got really bogged down by having like 8 different mascots that all had really subpar games. This one's actually pretty good. It's a fun little run and gun sort of platformer thing. I'm not the biggest Batman fan ever, but this is probably the best Batman game I've ever played. Not that that's saying much. I don't go out and play Batman games too often. But it's not a bad game if you want a platformer where your jumps and your movement feel like it has weight to it. You're not super floaty or anything, and it's just a fun little game. Next we move on to, oh, I reviewed this. No, this was actually from something else. Okay, we've got Bigfoots. by Acclaim. I reviewed this. This is not good. It's a racing game that has two different gameplay styles, which is really interesting. You've got like a top-down style that's actually pretty playable, although it has some of the worst sound effects ever in its power-up system in that mode. And it's got like this weird side-scrolly bit. Also, all the furnaces just kicked in, so I apologize for any noise. But this game, not that great. The top-down one is kind of playable. The side-scrolling one I could never figure out, but it's just not a very good game. But it is a monster truck game if that's what you want for your NES games. Next, we have another game that came with that bundle with Back to the Future and Batman. We have another B, Bobble. I love Bobble. I think it's got an amazing soundtrack. It's got really fun gameplay, but it is designed by absolute assholes. This is a game that you can't actually beat unless you play two-player, and that's actually very, very difficult. And I'm not saying that because I've had to play two-player on my own. I have, but Bobble is a tough game. It's definitely an arcade game, and it's a game that is designed to kick you when you're down. And even when you're about to win, nope, you don't get the ending because you played one player. It's not as bad as Rainbow Islands, but it's definitely a mean arcade game. Great game though, legendary soundtrack. Oh, next we have a very, very special game to me. We have Clash at Demonhead. This was very important to me because this was my very first NES game. I went and bought the Retron 3 when I started doing this channel because I had to do NES stuff at some point and I never had an NES. And there was one specific NES game I really, really wanted, but it was not on sale on Amazon, like it was just out of stock. But this was available and it was on sale for basically nothing. Also, amazing cover art. I would love to get a poster of this. But this was on sale for, I think, like a penny or something. I bought it and holy crap, this game is awesome. It is this giant non-linear platforming run-and-gun adventure featuring a very anime protagonist, Billy Big Bang Blitz, who I'm convinced is the greatest Dragon Ball character of all time, Yamcha, after he got disillusioned being surrounded by alien monkeys his whole life. Just wanting to show that he's the greatest world martial artist, also slash spy hero man guy ever. Has you fighting a flying skeleton named Tom Gycott, who's amazing, and it is a ridiculously deep game for an NES game. It's got a really deep story, and it's just a lot of fun. It's a game that you'll get lost in quite a lot. You need to write your own map, but I gotta admit, this is my first NES game. It wasn't what I wanted, but I'm glad I have it because this is easily my second favorite of all time. Like, this game is just so much fun. Next we have, convenient, the game I actually did want, my most wanted NES game of all time, and one I wanted before anything else. We have Crystallis, another NES game I have covered. This is a top-down RPG by SNK, the Neo Geo guys. This is actually available on their non-Neo Geo compilation that came out last year, so if you want to play it that way, you can. There's also a Game Boy Color version that we don't talk about because they kind of messed with the plot and a bunch of other stuff. But this has a really deep plot. The entire world's been destroyed. You're some scientist who kind of got put into cryogenic stasis and has to become a hero to defeat all the monsters and defeat this doomsday weapon that's judging humanity. It is a really fun game. It's got a lot of problems. It's a very early RPG. For example, like a lot of early RPGs, poison is an absolute death sentence. Like, if you get poisoned, you might as well just restart. I think there's only like 16 levels you can level up to in the game, so there's no real power leveling, and areas are level gated, so once you hit X level, you won't level anymore. But, and the menuing is just infuriatingly bad. But that said, this is my favorite NES game of all time, and damn if it's not a fun one. Also, if the story wasn't amazing, if the gameplay wasn't amazing, it has an incredibly kick-ass soundtrack and visual design. This is a legendary NES game, and I think this is a must-have for everyone. Okay. Next we have a game that I think a lot of people will recognize, at least the name of. We got this little obscure thing called Final Fantasy. I got this in a box with a bunch of other games. I was buying that for Drakengard 2, but I got this along with Bigfoot, and out of the two, this one's a lot better. I know a lot of sellers like to say this is a rare game and charge you out the ass for it. This is not a rare game. It's not super expensive. If you're paying more than maybe 20 bucks for it, you're getting overcharged. And the thing is, it's a very, very old game. It feels like it. They've made better iterations of this onto like the Game Boy Advance and the PlayStation and WonderSwan. But this is a great game. I love the Game Boy Advance version, but the thing about that I dislike is they took probably my favorite class, the Thief, and they completely changed his look. He used to have blue hair and be an elf. Now he's just a guy with a bandana. He's dumb. But they fixed a lot of things too. In this game, half the stats are actually completely without value. Like, if I recall, intelligence does nothing. So picking a character class that has like high intelligence means literally nothing. Thieves, who have like the best luck like ability of all time, does nothing. Half the spells that buff stats do the opposite. Like, it's like, okay, this spell will do like double damage to your character for a little while, and it's like, oh, it actually halves your character's damage output. Great. So this version of Final Fantasy, not that great, but it is iconic, and having it just for the sake of having it's really, really cool. And I actually do like original Final Fantasy quite a lot. I said it in my unviewable Final Fantasy 13 review, because of Square Enix's copyright claims, thanks for that, I don't think I can call myself a Final Fantasy fan anymore because there's more games in the series I hate than I love, but this one is great. Everything before they jump to like 3D is pretty awesome though, but that one is special. Alright, next we have another RPG, and I have to give shoutouts to my old college buddy Kevin for letting me know about this game. We have Ghost Lion. I have reviewed this game. This is an interesting little RPG because it's an RPG where you don't really gain levels. First of all, they changed the names of all the stuff. If I recall, it's like levels are now like, I think it's like bravery, powers like faith, health is like dreams or something like that. They've got really like flowery names for all your stats, but what's interesting is there's no proper leveling system. Like, you don't get experience killing enemies. All your levels are gained through items you find in the world, so it heavily favors exploration, but it means that adventuring is really dangerous because early on, everything will kill you, and you have to go to like places you're not supposed to go to get stuff, just so that you can level a little bit so you can actually fight stuff to get money. But it's not the most well-balanced RPG of all time. It's really hard to find one too. I've only seen one copy of this. It was at a place in a farmer's market. That's where I bought this, and it sat there for years because the lady who runs the place, because it's the only classic game shop in town, she overcharges out the year for it, but I really wanted this, so I grabbed it for her exorbitant price. I really like Ghost Lion. It's interesting. I'm thinking about doing a Let's Play of it at some points because RPGs are fun, and I love RPGs. But Ghost Lion, good times, very unique RPG. If you can find it for a good price, you should try it, but it's a bit unforgiving. Alright, next we have probably the earliest anime game the NES had in North America that kept its license, thank you Dragon Ball. We have Golgo 13, Top Secret Episode. I'm actually not super familiar with Duke Togo, Golgo 13 over here. I know he's some kind of super sniper, and this game seemed like a really neat idea. It's a sort of side-scrolling shooter, sort of first-person shooter, sort of first-person exploration, sort of like sniper simulator, sort of like text-based event. It's like a combination of about a million different things, and it's just a very genuinely interesting experience. It's not well made and it's really unforgiving at points, but considering this might be like the very first anime game we got that actually kept its anime license, that's a big deal. And, you know, this game's actually relatively inexpensive. Last I checked, it's like, at most, you'd pay like $10 for it. Not a great game, but very, very, very interesting. Alright, what do we have next? Ooh! We have another game that came with that bundle with Bobble. We have The Goonies 2. Because, Goonies. I like the Goonies movie. I haven't seen it in years, but I remember quite enjoying it. The Cyndi Lauper music and all that. Goonies was a fun little adventure. It was very much an 80s movie, And this is a game that's sort of supposed to be the sequel to it, kind of. It's actually a sequel to the NES, or the NES, the Famicom original Goonies game. I think there's like 3 or something like that. The Japan, like, Famicom got so many different Goonies games, and I have trouble keeping which one's which straight. I think this one, from what I remember, is the just sort of standard side-scrolling platform with some first-person puzzle elements. Like I said, it's been a while since I played this, but it's not a bad game. It's a little bit tough. It's made by Konami back when they did something worth anything. And it kind of shows because Konami actually valued the Goonies IP so much that when they made their own sort of like all-stars sort of game, the YY World games, only available on the Famicom, they included the protagonist from the Goonies. And King Kong. Right alongside Simon Belmont and Gaumont for some reason. It was a weird series of games. I really want to get them. They're kind of hard to find. But Goonies the Adventure, it wasn't a bad little thing to add to the little bundle that I got. Okay, next we have a game with a cover art that looks like it's ripped straight from a metal album. In fact, I am pretty sure it is actually stolen. We have the Guardian Legend. I'm not sure if it's the Japanese or the European version, but it's got like this much better box art than what we got. But the Guardian Legend is an interesting game. The best way I can describe it is sort of like, as it says down here, it's part of the Action series, whatever that means. Wonder if there were any more of those. But this is an action game, but it's an action game that gives you a couple different gameplay styles. The best way I can describe it is it's sort of like, you know how Blaster Master was sort of like a top-down adventure shooter combined with like a side-scrolling platforming shooter? This is sort of like that, but get rid of the side-scrolling and just make it a vertical-scrolling shmup. You run around as this girl, defeating enemies, trying to unlock all these secret locations, find new weapons, and play these awesome shmup stages. The adventuring stages aren't as well done. They're a bit cryptic and a bit just sort of maze-like, but it's a lot of fun, and it's not a very expensive game. I think I paid like $15 at the same lady who overcharges everything that I got Ghostline for, so, you know, for $15, and that's overcharging, you know, great game. And it's a very varied experience. Alright, next we have a game I have never played. It came with the, bundle I got with Bobble and stuff. I don't know if I'm doing this just yet, but I'm thinking about maybe trying to overlay gameplay footage, so if I do, I guess I'll have had played this, but we have Jack Nicklaus Golf. Greatest 18 holes of major championship golf. Also a star, and a coffee stain. Someone took very good care of this. It's a golf game. I haven't played too many NES golf games. I played the original NES Golf, and that's it. Not the biggest golf guy ever. I liked Candy Stan's mini golf game back when you could play that, the Lifesaver one. That was a great game. If someone can find that online, let me know, because Candy Stan's flash games were amazing. Oh, next we have another LJN published game. We have The Karate Kid, based on the Jaden Smith Jackie Chan venture where you learn Kung Fu and not karate, of course. This game is not very good. It's weird and it's interesting. It starts off in like a fighting game mode and then it turns to like a platformer and then it throws random challenges at you, but they're not good. I'm not sure what else to say about it. I'm not a big fan of the Karate Kid the movies, but you know, it's a game based off of movies and it looks like a dog chewed up my cart in the cartridge, thank you brain, in the corner of the cartridge. But what can you do? Oh, and down here. I don't know why someone would do this to this poor cartridge. Maybe it's because they realized it's the Karate Kid and they wanted something slightly better. Maybe Karateka or something. Oh, next we have a unheard gem by Culture Brain. We have The Magic of Shaharzad. This is a very, very cool game. It is kind of overly complicated though. It's an RPG that is both like a top-down adventure RPG, not unlike Crystallis, as well as sometimes a turn-based RPG, not unlike Final Fantasy. Sometimes you just go into rooms and a bunch of guys will jump out of the bushes and you can hack them apart with your sword, kind of like Zelda. Sometimes you suddenly enter a random encounter and you have to just turn-based fight your way out. What's interesting is, like Ghostline, this is a game where you play as a summoner. And, you know, along with Ghostline, this might be one of the earliest iterations of a game where you get to play as a summoner. You've got all these, like, magical genies you can summon to attack enemies and stuff. I think it's a very cool game. It's a very complicated game, and I've never gotten very far, but I love this game, and I really do want to spend a lot more time with it because it is, I think, a completely unheard of gem. Magic of Shaharzad, very cool game by Culture Brain. I think those are the guys who did like the Ninja Brothers and stuff like that. It is a great little RPG, and I am running out of memory card space, so I will be back in a minute with our next game. Alright, next we have a completely legendary game series. We have Mega Man 3. This is the only original Mega Man game I physically own, but this is probably my favorite out of the original 6 on the NES for sure. I know a lot of people like 2 better. I like 3 better. More content, you know, you get to fight the boss from the second game again, you get to fight the Dark Man stages, you get to fight Proto Man, tons of stuff in this game. And it also has some really interesting attacks, although let's just be honest, Topspin is terrible. It is still an awesome Mega Man game. It's gonna be good. Even the bad ones are still somewhat good. And I mean, hell, 4 was the worst one of the lot, and you know, that one was still fine, but I definitely prefer 3. 3 is probably my favorite Mega Man game. This came with the bundle of everything else I got. And that was just sort of lucky. It's like, oh hey, it's a Mega Man game and it's my favorite one. Nice. Okay, next we have, oh, this is a historically important game. We have Mendel Palace. Now, Mendel Palace was a game made by Satoshi Tajiri, the guy who made Pokemon. As I hit my camera, I apologize. I've got a review of this, you should go check it out. But it's an interesting little like arcadey kind of sort of puzzle game. When he created this game, he built it around the concept of like flipping cards, where, you know, the entire stage is made out of cards and you have to flip it under your opponents to sort of send them hurtling into the walls. It's an interesting idea, and there's tons of different enemies that all behave slightly differently. And you can just select any level you want in any order. It's a really interesting opening way to play a game. Like, it's open, you can select whatever level you want, you can challenge whatever enemy you want. Very, very cool. And what's interesting was the development of this game, because when Tajiri made this, he actually had completed this game entirely in Famicom Basic and then just handed it to Nintendo and said, hey, you want to, you know, sell this? And they said, sure. And that's not how that works, you know? You don't like hand a finished product to someone and just say, hey, you want to make money off this? No, normally you have to have them fund you to get there. Okay, so now we've got another pretty important game. You might recall how most of my NES games are from a bundle. Well, now we've got the game that I bought that bundle for. We have Monster Party. This is a weird game, and I think it's one of the most must-have NES games of all time. It's not a great game. Sort of like Clash of Demonhead, not a great game necessarily. It's rough around the edges, but it's excellent where it needs to be. This is weird because it feels like it's a game that flies against all the rules that Nintendo had set in place. There's like blood, there's gore, there's death. People welcome you to hell openly. This is a weird, bizarre game that feels like it shouldn't be on the NES, and yet it absolutely is. And this is one of my most favorite NES games just because of how strange it is. And even though it's not the most like well-polished experience ever, it's just so bloody weird that I think it's absolutely a must-have. Monster Party is a great game, and it's getting more and more famous over the years and getting rarer and more expensive. I remember when I started this, Monster Party was like a game people would pay you to take away, and now I had to pay like, you know, $80 for a bundle that contained it just for that, whereas, you know, without the bundle it would have been like $70, so I might as well go with the bundle. Okay, next we have a game by Jildico. I reviewed this way back in the day. It's not very good, but it's an interesting concept. We have Pinball Quest. Basically trying to turn a pinball table into Legend of Zelda, sorta. Basically, it's a pinball game where you are given a quest, hence the name, where you have to, you know, go save a princess, defeat an ancient dragon or an ancient evil or whatever. It's been forever since I played this because I know that level 2 is kind of designed in a dumb way that makes it almost unplayable. Physics are not great, it's not the most realistic, but the idea that you're combining pinball with, like, you know, an actual RPG, an adventure game, a story, something interesting, I think this game helped inspire a lot of significantly better pinball games out there, and that's a huge deal. I think this game is great despite its flaws, and, you know, it's definitely an interesting thing to look at, but if you're looking for a pinball game that is the most well-made ever, As it says on the cartridge, the world's first pinball fantasy. It feels like it's a first attempt at something, but it's still an interesting idea that deserves a lot of recognition because, you know, we need more games like that. It's very fun. Okay, next we have another game I reviewed way back in the day. We have Roller Games, the Gem and the Holograms game, as I think I called it once. This is a beat 'em up by Ultra, which, if you don't know, was, I think, Konami's American branch. I know they were a branch of Konami. This is a game based off of roller derby. Basically, you run around, skating around, platforming, and beating people up. It is a really fun time. I'm not all that familiar with roller derby, but I like this game a lot. Again, it's not the most well-polished game ever. If I recall, the jumps and like the collision are a little bit spotty, and because you're on roller skates, you kind of skid around everywhere, so the actual platforming is not good. But man, it's a pretty fun game. I still like roller games a fair bit, even if it's pretty rough around the edges. It's a fun little beat 'em up on the NES for sure. Alright, next we have a game I got, I think, as a Christmas present. We have Star Tropics, which has some really awesome box art. This was a really cool adventure platformer thing. You run around as a kid with a yo-yo trying to fight monsters in caves looking for your uncle, and then it turns out aliens, because aliens. It's a really grand adventure, and it feels almost like kind of a proto-Earthbound on the NES, although of course, you know, Mother, the original Earthbound, did come out on the NES, so, you know, it's not exactly the perfect game, and it's not exactly the perfect prototype to, say, Earthbound, but it's an interesting sort of American look at RPGs in a different way, and it's definitely very goofy and full of personality. I love Earthbound. I'd like a copy, but I love Star Tropics. Never played the sequel. I've heard it's nowhere near as good. But, you know, if nothing else, we have the original Star Tropics. It had a lot of interesting puzzles. I won't spoil the big one, as my cat climbs up the wall and made a bunch of noise. I apologize for that. But, you know, it's a very special and unique NES game, and I think Star Tropics is absolutely wonderful. And it would be cool to get another one in the series, I think. Alright, next we have a game that I think everyone knows, Mario Bros. Duck Hunt. A game that I will probably get flagged for including footage of, because I have countless times. Weirdly enough, by Nintendo of Germany. I don't know why specifically the German branch of Nintendo is copyright claiming everything, but it's always them. Weird. Anyway, you got Duck Hunt, which I can't do anything with because I don't have a light gun or CRT, but you got the original Mario, which is a lot of fun. Not really much else I can say about it. It's a great little combination cartridge that has two wonderful games if you can play them, and it's very important. I've never seen an individual Mario Kart, or a Super Mario Bros. Kart, or an individual Duck Hunt cart. I've seen a triple cart that contained that, and I think stadium events or something like that, but I'm most familiar with this dual cart, and having one is, if nothing else, a nostalgia trip for me, because even though I never had an NES, my uncle did, and this was the very cart he had. Well, it's the same game, so to have the exact same cart that I'm familiar with from when I was a kid, that's pretty cool to me. Alright, we are getting down there. We have used game at $7.49. I paid more than that, but we have Treasure Master. I've reviewed this game too. This is not a particularly good game. It is a game that was basically a contest by MTV. Basically, you'd play through the game a bunch of times, then they'd release a code, you'd play the game with that code involved, and then you could unlock the final level, which would give you a code you'd give them, and then you'd maybe win a prize. I don't know. It was weird. But on the bright side, your character had the most amazing walk animation ever. It had tremendous music. Seriously, the Treasure Master soundtrack is legendary. And, you know, it's not a fun game. It feels like it's designed to be sort of like a platformer meets like one of those old Sierra point-and-click adventures that kill you at every step. It's not fair, it's not well made, and it's not necessarily fun, but it has some interesting things to it. Also, it has some legendarily awesome box art, and this guy, who might be the single coolest person ever. Yeah. Okay, next we have another game I've never played because it came with my bundle and it wasn't something I cared about. We have Michael Andretti World GP. by Sammy, and I know Sammy made some really interesting things. I know they made not motion capture, the photo captured Jackie Chan fighting games on the arcade. That's what I know Sammy best from. I guess it's a driving game with Michael Andretti. I guess I'll see what this is if I'm capturing footage for this, so we'll know. Not a game I've played, but it's one I got in a bundle, so why am I going to complain? But it's something to talk about at some points. Yeah. Now we have the last physical NES cart in my collection. I don't have a lot of these, but we have another game I reviewed way back in the day. This game is legendarily fun and yet really obscure. We have Worm, spelled with a U, Journey to the Center of the Erath by Asmik. This is a really, really fun game. It's very anime, and it features you taking like this underground tank and like side-scrolling shmupping your way to the end of the level, then turning it into like a platforming shooter, and then turning it into like a first-person RPG shooter slash like text adventure. It is an absolutely strange game, and I love it. It is one of the most odd NES games I've ever had to experience, and I think it is one of the most interesting for sure, for sure. I think Worm is a game you absolutely need to experience, because it is, I've just got this huge grin on my face just thinking back to this game. It's not the most well-made game, you know, Crisis, Crystallis, Clash of Demonhead, you know, Monster Party, not the best, most polished games ever, but they are some of my favorites. I think the ones that are flawed and just do something interesting are far more interesting than necessarily the best, most polished experiences. Yes, the interesting ones are interesting, thank you, brain. Worm, it is probably one of the most interesting NES experiences I've had, and I'm always on the lookout for more interesting NES experiences, so this one was fun, and to have this as one of my earlier NES experiences, I'm very thankful for that. And that is it for my physical NES stuff, but we're not done because, of course, as someone who likes to import a lot of games, this will shock you, but I've got quite a few games to show off. My camera's about to do a thing with my file, so I will be back in just a sec, and we will take a look. Okay, so starting off, we have a game I have reviewed a long time ago. We have Armadillo. This game is actually getting harder and harder to find, but Armadillo is like this interesting little platformer where you play as this adorable little armadillo, like bouncing and rolling around. It's weird because you move so slow in your like armadillo form, so you turn into the ball and you move very, very fast, but it's a little tough to control. So it's like, well, you can put yourself in a lot of danger and move really, really slow, or you can move fast and end in pits. But it has some really interesting physics, and it's a really interesting experience. If you haven't been able to tell by my use of the term interesting about a billion times, aside from the fact I can't come up with better words to say, I like games that are interesting. When games do something interesting, it's more, you know, interesting for me. So I like the ones that always try something different. And Armadillo is a fun little platformer that definitely does something different. Next we have the most amazing bright pink cartridge of all time. We have Cocorone. This is a game made by the same people who did the legendary Little Samson. But more importantly, this game is basically Mega Man, but you get to design your own character and your own attacks. And every time you kill a boss, you get to make a new character. And you're saving a dream world with your friend, the magical pajama-wearing dancing taper guy. I love Cocorone. Kind of sad because this was apparently supposed to get like either a sequel or a port on the PC Engine, and it never did. Kind of unfortunate because this game really is fun, and it is a must-have Famicom game, but it is hard to find and it never did get a sequel. But at the same time, we did get Little Samson, so, you know, it's okay, but give me Cocorone too, damn it. Next we have a game that I bought the Japanese version of because the North American version was so expensive. We have Faria, a world of mystery and adventure. It is a very early, I think very early anyway. Yeah, it's not actually all that early, but it feels like a very early RPG, and it's not very good. Like I said about Crystallis, you know, poison will kill you instantly, and unlike Crystallis, it's not very clear when you're poisoned. You just sort of drop and then die. The first dungeon is ridiculously overly complicated, and there's just not a lot about this game that feels well thought out or done. But that said, it's an interesting little excursion into the world of action RPGs. It's not well done, but it's interesting. That said, you know, don't buy the North American version that costs over $200 because it's not any better, it's just a lot more expensive. If you can apply a translation patch like I do, the Japanese version, which I bought for pennies, would be a lot more sensible. Okay, next we got a game I bought in a bundle of 4 that I don't actually want, but we got Gyrodyne. This is a very simple shooter by Taito. You play as a helicopter and you shoot stuff. That's really it. I actually haven't played this on this cartridge. I played it on a multi-card a long time ago, though. It's not the most interesting game ever. Like I said, I got this in a bundle with like 3 other games, and this was not what I wanted out of it. But for something I got for free, you know, why not? Why not include Gyrodyne? It costs nothing extra. Also, Taito branded their cartridge. It's really interesting to see how like different some of the Famicom cartridges are, because the NES carts, they all look basically identical. Aside from the earlier iterations, which kind of had like a Famicom converter inside, they're basically the same, whereas the actual Famicom cartridges are a lot different. And I think that's very interesting. Okay, next we move to a much better shooter. We have Image Fight. Image Fight is a fun little shooter that contains a bunch of different weapons. I have done a gameplay video on this, and I think it's not as amazing as, say, like something like Crisis Force, but it's also really cheap, unlike Crisis Force, which I think makes it probably a more palatable game. I think this was also available on the PC Engine and in the arcades, and those were better versions of it, but I like Image Fight. It's a fun little shooter, and if you like shooters, this one's not bad. Not a ton to say about it. It's a very simple game, but you know, it's a good one. Alright, next we have the game I bought in that bundle. For that bundle, we have Joy Mech Fight. This is a game I've made like 3 videos on at this point, and it features Sukapon, the little pink guy from Smash that everyone knows, but this is a game no one knows. This is probably like the most competent Famicom NES fighter you will ever find, and that's because there was like 2. Seriously, it was like this and TMNT Tournament Fighters, and this was a lot better. It's kind of like Mega Man in the sense that you pick a character, which in this case starts as Sukapon, you go through all the levels, you fight all the different characters, and when you defeat them, they get added to your roster so you can use their abilities against your opponents and gain more opponents and new characters. It's a cool idea, I quite like it, and it's ridiculously smooth and fast playing for a Famicom fighting game. Like, I was genuinely surprised how well this game played. Yeah, this is a fun one for sure. Okay, next we have, again, going back to the NES and Famicom having more interesting cartridges, we have something by Konami. We have Lagrange Points. Now, Lagrange Points by Konami in this giant cartridge, well, there's a reason why it's in this giant cartridge, and that is because that this cartridge happens to feature some unique internal hardware. It contains extra chips and improved chips to give you a better soundtrack and visual experience, similar to how the Famicom version of Castlevania 3 had. And it's a really interesting RPG. You run around this space station trying to try and figure out what you're supposed to be doing. Basically, like, your superior officer dies and just gives you a name and says, find this, and you have to try and figure out who or what, you know, what you're looking for is. You got a ton of different allies. You've got androids and monsters and stuff. You have a very impressive weapon crafting system, vehicles. If you like RPGs, this is a very deep and impressive RPG. This is one of the most interesting, one of the best on the Famicom, for sure. I really love Lagrange Points. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely pretty high up on the list for Famicom RPGs. And we are back on a whole different day, so if it seems like I'm kind of a little bit disconnected from what we did last time, it's because I had to record this at a different time because a bunch of stuff got in the way. Anyway, we finished Lagrange Point, and we're now on to the next one. This is a classic. We have Makaimura, a game that we would know as Ghosts and Goblins. Capcom classic. I'm not the biggest fan of this game. I actually really like the spin-off game starring the villain Firebrand, which I think that's supposed to be him up in the corner, the red blaze, the red armor, because those are more like platforming RPGs, whereas this is a standard arcadey platform, and it is designed to kick you when you're down. It is definitely an arcade game. It is not a game that likes you. This is a game that kicks you when you're down and makes you play it twice just to see the ending, and it is a very depressing ending. If you're going to play one of these games, I would suggest the Super Nintendo version. I played Super Girls and Ghosts. That one's a little bit better, but again, it's very much the same thing. Very hardcore platformer, really tough, diamond, rock hard, whatever you want to call it. It is a very, very incredibly difficult game, but damn if it's not a classic. Alright, next we have... Okay, I got this in a bundle with Joy Mech Fight. I don't know how eBay works. Like, you can sometimes mouse over an image and sometimes it'll zoom in and, you know, you'll be able to see actually what it is. This bundle, it did not. So when I saw this there, I actually had no idea what this was. This is Ovation Saga. It is, again, it's a Taito custom cart, which is kind of nice. But this is a kind of standard RPG. It was a game I actually really wanted to play, and I haven't had a chance yet. I guess I will by the time this is done. And there is a translation floating around out there, so I really want to try this. But I was pretty excited. This was a nice little surprise, given that, once again, I couldn't really zoom into the image to actually see what this was, and it was a really blurry picture, but I just want to know why I couldn't do that. Like, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. eBay's weird, I guess. But Ovation Saga, it had a series of, I want to say, like 3 or so games, and overall it's a fun little RPG as I understand it. I'm pretty excited to give it a shot. Alright, next we have another custom cart, this one by Bandai. We have Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam Hot Scramble. This is a dirt cheap little Famicom game, and it's not bad. I've reviewed this. It's kind of like, it combines 2 different game types. You got one game type that plays kind of sort of like Afterburner, and then you got another one that kind of sort of plays like Thexter. So you got like a first-person shooter combined with like sort of a third-person like side-scrolly shooter thing. Not bad. I definitely prefer Gundam versus Zeta Gundam. I think that's the better Zeta game, but for an early Famicom game, this game's not bad. In fact, it was one of the earliest console releases. In fact, I believe it is the earliest console release. A lot of people think this is the original Gundam game. That's not true. I believe like 3 PC adventure games exist before this, but I'm pretty sure this was the first console game, which still makes it kind of important in its own right. Plus, it stars the cast and crew from Zeta Gundam, which, I mean, Zeta Gundam is one of the best Gundam games. I always say it's my second favorite next to 8 MS Team. Just a great series. Alright, next we get a game by Tecmo, and it's not a game type you kind of expect from them. We have Radius Senki. Now this is a action RPG. In fact, it feels kind of like a prototype of Tales of in a lot of different respects. In fact, I believe a lot of people who worked on the Tales of series kind of had their hands in this, or at least they took inspiration from this. It's been a while since I looked up like the history of this game. But what's interesting is this is the last game by Tecmo that featured the Tecmo Theater style of like anime cutscenes. This was the very last one to get it, which kind of makes it pretty important, but more important to me, at least, is this is a really damn good RPG. In fact, this would probably be my favorite import RPG for the system that I've been able to play thus far. I mean, there's still 1 or 2 I haven't gotten my hands on, Sweet Home notably, but Radius Senki, if I'm only going to recommend one import RPG for your Famicom, this is the one, because it is just a damn fun game, and it's really unique. Great story, great gameplay, really excellent presentation, ton of fun, awesome game. Alright, next we have, I believe this is the last game I got in that bundle with Joy Mech Fight. This would probably be the most throwaway game. It's another game by Bandai. We have Saint Seiya. Now there's actually 2 Saint Seiya games out there on the Famicom. There's one that's like a proper RPG, and then there's one that's like a side-scrolling platformer combined with an RPG. I believe this is the platformy one, but both require a pretty decent understanding of Japanese to be able to play, so this one's kind of a throwaway game from the small bundle I got. But again, I got it for Joy Mech Fight, and Ovation Saga was just a nice bonus. And then I got Kimura as well. This was definitely the low point of that bundle, but you know, if you're into Saint Seiya, it might be worth checking out if you can read Japanese. Otherwise, I played this on a couple multi-carts. It's not very good, but I've also not been the biggest Saint Seiya fan ever. I watched a little bit of Knights of the Zodiac with that Bowling for Soup cover of that awesome Flock of Seagulls song as their theme song, and honestly, the theme song was the best part of it from what I remember. It has been a long time since I've played Saint Seiya though, or Knights of the Zodiac. Alright, next we have a game I have referenced about 1 billion times, and this is Sansara Naga. Now this is a game that I wish had a translation. Okay, that's not actually true. It does have a translation, but the sad thing is, even though Sansara Naga does have a translation, it is in a really bizarre format that none of my equipment can actually apply it to properly. So the only way I've gotten to be able to play this in English is on a multi-cart, which means I have to use the Retron 3, which looks and sounds horrible, but this game is so much fun. Basically, you play a guy who stole an egg, thinking it was a dragon's egg. Apparently it was just an ostrich egg, and you're shamed by your village. And then you have to basically actually find a dragon, hatch it, and then raise it as your partner. And the dragon actually does the most of the fighting, which is really interesting. And what's more interesting is, even though it's a green dragon on the cover, the color of your dragon actually varies depending on your actions. Like, if you run from every fight, you get a green dragon, which is a coward. If you kill everything, you get like a black dragon, which is super violent and won't listen to your orders. If you play just right and have like the equal amounts of like defensive, offensive, and like sort of strategy to it, you get like a white dragon, which is like a super dragon. But what's really interesting is your dragon just changes colors depending on what you do before it hatches. It's not a wide period of time for you to really influence it, so it's interesting. Also, you can pick a fight with basically every character ever, and I've only played 2 or 3 games where that's actually a thing, where just any random NPC, even just animals or whatever, you can just pick fights with them. And that's really interesting to me. This game needs a more accessible translation, because I'm a big fan of this game. I just wish I could understand it. Okay, this is an example of me being an idiot. This happens a lot when I buy games, because I research so much into games, I usually like mix them up. Here we have Super Xevious in this really, really sexy gold-plated cartridge. And this is basically, you know, Xevious, only super. It's basically Xevious 2, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great little shmup, and if you're a fan of Xevious, this is a must-have, because it takes everything that was good from Xevious and makes it better. I'm not the biggest fan of Xevious. I think it's a little bit too basic, but I respect it for what it is. This game I actually like. The problem is, though, I thought I was getting Super Star Force, which is basically a super version of Star Force, which takes the shmup elements of Star Force and combines it with an RPG, and I was really excited to get that. Unfortunately, I got Super Xevious instead, mixing them up entirely, because I'm just kind of like that sometimes, unfortunately. But this is still a great game, especially if you love Star Force. Well, it might be great if you like Star Force, but it's a great game if you love Xevious, because it's basically a newer, better version of Xevious. Alright, next we have a game influenced by my importing for the Super Famicom. We have Wagonland 2. You may recall my review of Wagon Paradise, where I talked about the awesome, like, import edutainment that was Wagon Paradise. This is one of the earlier games in the series. Now, whereas Wagon Paradise was like this great game where even if you didn't really understand Japanese, with the exception of 1 or 2 challenges, you could get through all of it pretty easily, because it was just like intuitive and reactionary and stuff. This one, it's basically entirely driven by your ability to read. There's lots of shiratori, there's lots of like just identifying stuff and explaining what you see. It gets bad. It's not as bad as like the other Super Nintendo games, but it's pretty unplayable if you can't understand Japanese, which is a shame, because Wagon Paradise was so bloody good that I just want to play more of them, but unfortunately it's kind of sort of unplayable. And now we move on to the final of my Famicom cartridges, and possibly the most important, because it was my first one. I bought this back when I got the Retron 3, back before I didn't realize Famicom and NES had different sized cartridges. So I bought this before I could even play, because I didn't have a converter. And that is Yume Penguin Monogatari, Dream Penguin Adventure, a game by Konami, and an absolute must-have import game. You play as, I believe, Pentaro. He was one of the penguins. They had like 4 of them, trying to rescue his girlfriend, Penmina, I believe I called her. I think her name's actually Penko, but I like Penmina better. What's interesting is it's a platformer around dieting. Your girlfriend basically breaks up with you and goes out with like this super cool penguin and says, well, look, if you want me back, you gotta, you know, diet, exercise, get less chubby. So he takes to like having all these diet drinks that are supplied to his opponents by his rival for some reason. Maybe his rival secretly wants him to get thin so he can have his girl back. I don't know. That's kind of thoughtful. But what's interesting is it's a combination of a really, really fun platformer along with a side-scrolling shmup. And those shmup elements are not very good, honestly. They're really difficult. I want to do a full playthrough of this because it's not a long game, but those parts get really, really tough. But this game is a lot of fun. It's a little unforgiving, though. If you're not thin enough by the end of the level, they make you redo it. And if you're not thin enough by the end of the game, like on the last level, you just happen to get a little bit chubby during the final encounter because instead of bullets, they throw like apples and rice balls at you. They actually game over you, and you have to start over. So it's not a very kind game, but it's a lot of fun, and this is the kind of game that is what importing for the Famicom is all about. This was my first import for the console, and you know, it's one of my favorites. It's up there definitely with like Kokoron for probably my favorite import for the system. That or Radius Senkai. Now, those are all my individual cartridges, but I've got a couple other things I'd like to show off. So we'll just continue this Famicom train with Dragon Buster 2. Now, the reason why I want to show this off separately, and I think this is obvious, this is boxed. And this is in a Namco box, which means it has like this really, really bloody nice clamshell, and it's just, a box like this is kind of a thing of beauty from the past, you know? It makes me really want to collect all the Namco games, just knowing that they're all in these boxes. I'll have to buy another copy of Wagonland too, I guess. But, you know, Namco boxes, they're just a thing of beauty, and I want to collect them all. Dragon Buster is sort of the sequel to Dragon Slayer, I believe. It goes back to its arcade roots. The original Dragon Buster was pretty hard from what I recall. I actually have not had time to play this one. But I got this at, well, actually, I showed it off in the very first one of these videos that I did with my camera, in that I got it at this amazing garage sale that will probably be a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and if I had more money, I would have bought him out entirely. But he had amazing imports, and I saw a boxed Famicom game, and I said, I need that. And I got it for an absolute steal. Now, the next thing I'd like to show off is more in the NES route, as I wipe all my cat hair off of it, because he sat on it. We have something I never thought I'd see, and when I did, I just had to get it. We have a boxed NES game. And that's the thing. This is Kabuki Quantum Fighter. It's awesome. I did a review of it. It's kind of like Ninja Gaiden, sort of like a diet Ninja Gaiden. It's a lot of fun. Has a great soundtrack, and you should really play this game if you like Ninja Gaiden. But it's a boxed NES game. Like, back in the day, people threw out all their boxes. They threw out all the instructions, because who needed it? You got the game, so keep the game, throw all the other stuff out. It's just wrapping. So to find an actual boxed copy, that's kind of a big deal. Now, I got this at the same place as Ghostline, the one lady in town who sells retro games, so she overcharged. But boxed, I got it for $35, as you can kind of see here. You know, for a boxed NES, just to experience a boxed NES, I think that's pretty damn good. And I think that is a very, very cool thing. Now, I do have one last thing. It came with that huge Bobble bundle that came with, like, Monster Party and stuff. We have, as I understand, this is an actual official Nintendo product, an actual NES case that's, like, supposed to, like, store all your NES games in it. I think this middle part, which is clearly too small for any actual NES games, I think that was for, like strategy guides or manuals or something. For some reason, when I bought it, like, all these slots were filled with those games that I ordered, so this whole thing sold. But, like, the inside had a router in it for some reason. I mean, free router. But, yeah, this is, like, apparently, like, an official Nintendo NES, like, storage case thing. Someone wrote on the side of it, Nintendo games, books, don't touch. So, I mean, I'm not the kind of collector where it's like, oh, that ruins it because it's not how it was or whatever, but I think it's kind of sad that someone wrote on the side of this. I'm guessing when this was initially purchased, someone just got it like stocked full of games at a car boot sale for like just a bundle deal. I don't know. But yeah, I've got this now. And that's it for my NES stuff. I do not have a lot of NES games. I don't have a lot of Famicom games. Most of my stuff is on multi-carts, as you can probably imagine. But we'll take a look at that at some point. One more rule on this stuff that I just thought about before last night after I recorded, because I meant to mention this, but anything I purchase throughout the year will not be included in these videos because, as I sort of said, I keep that stuff separate for Game of the Year stuff just so I can sort of keep what I bought this year straight from everything else. But there's going to be lots of those loot videos over the course of the year, so they're still going to be shown off, so don't worry about that. But anyway, this is the first part of my collection to celebrate 1,000 of you awesome people subscribing to my channel and checking stuff out. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you get excited for more, because I guess next month, if we're doing this in order, it's going to be Super Famicom and Super Nintendo. Oh god, that's going to be a big one. I'm going to have to clean off the table a couple times, I think. I just gave myself a lot of work, and I'm only now realizing it. Oh, dear lord. Anyway, that is it for episode 1 of just exploring my collection. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you feel a little bit closer to me and this channel. That's the whole point. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at all my awesome NES games, even though there aren't many, because I don't have the biggest collection ever. And if you enjoyed, you know, follow the show, subscribe, all that good stuff, comment, let me know what your favorite NES stuff is, compare your collection to mine. I'd love to hear what your collection is. If you got suggestions on what I want to look into next for NES stuff, let me know. You know, use that comment section, it's what it's there for. And if you really want to make my day, check out the show's PayPal or Patreon, support the show any way you can so that I can, you know, get more NES games. Having money is nice. I don't have a lot of it. I make it mostly through this show, so any support or donations for games so I can increase these. If you want to get rid of your old NES stuff, you know, let me know. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that, you know, this helps make you feel a little bit more close to the show. I certainly, that was kind of my intention when I was doing this. And check back next month when we'll do Super Nintendo stuff, I guess. That'll be fun. But between now and then, you know, got tons of reviews, got daily Mario streams on my Twitch channel, we got Animal Crossing until the new one comes out, gameplay, we got everything. So if you're just joining the show for the first time, you know, check it out, tons of stuff, and I will see you next time. Peace out, Internet.